G'day and welcome to this this intimate chat with Toby Walsh. This is a reschedule from a couple of weeks ago when, unfortunately, the technology gremlins and Wi-Fi AIs maybe attacking us from above. Toby got in the way of a hotspot, which meant that we lost you right at the critical time. So we are reattempting this little chat with Professor Toby Walsh around his Eureka Prize and everything AI. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Tom Carruthers. I'm the co-president of the Australian Science Communicators. First of all, I will acknowledge that I am streaming to you from Ngunnawal land. Many people also refer to this area as Canberra. We did have here a number of events that I also wanted to acknowledge last time, which included the Prime Minister's prizes and an acknowledgement of the amazing science and outreach that those scientists do to get their story told. I'll make a specific mention of Michelle Simmons, who is the 2023 Prime Minister's Prize for Science awardee, who was recognised for creating the new field of atomic electronics. It's a fascinating story to have a look at. Her work is instrumental in the quantum race in this country and indeed globally. I'll also, specifically in relation to computation and cryptography and all things computers, reference Ms. Donna Buckley, who was the 2023 Prime Minister's Prize for Excellence in Science Teaching in Secondary Schools. Ms. Buckley was recognised for inspiring students with diverse creative backgrounds to apply mathematics to real-world problems like cybersecurity. Plus many more. Have a look at the PM's Prize for Science website to find out more details. But we are here to talk about the Australian Museum Eureka Awards, and specifically the couple of awards that are related to science outreach and science communication. So from the Australian Museum, they describe the Eureka Prizes as the country's most comprehensive national science awards, honouring excellence across the areas of research and innovation, leadership, science engagement, and school science. They're presented each year in partnership with some of the nation's leading scientific institutions, government organisations, universities, corporations, and the Eureka Prizes they have the goal of raising the profile of science and science engagement in the community by celebrating outstanding achievement. Of course, we're here with Toby Walsh, who's tuning in from the Qantas Lounge on his way down to Melbourne to be part of the Q&A panel tonight. So I'm particularly excited that we get to ask a couple of questions of you before you get onto the panel and we have to fight the rest of the country to ask you questions. Thank you so much for fitting us into your schedule, Toby. I have a little introduction here, which is half written by the Australian Museum and half kind of like put together from what I found as well, that you are a world-renowned authority in AI or artificial intelligence. You like to explore subjects such as self-driving cars and autonomous weapons. You're on TV, in books, and at academic forums. You lead conversations about what the AI-driven future looks like, and how we might be able to prepare for it, what we should be wary of. You and I met back when I was working at the Academy of Science, where you're a fellow, and it was in fact with a collaborative event to do with the Academy of Law and how AI might have implications from a legal perspective. That was back in 2021. You're a fellow of many academies and different associations. I'm not going to list them all, and you also have won many research excellence awards. But we are here to celebrate the 2023 Celestino Eureka Prize for Promoting Understanding of Science. Congratulations, Toby, on your prize. First of all, can you tell us a little bit how it felt to be receiving this prize? I believe it's the first prize you've received specifically for science outreach rather than your science research.
It is. I did receive a prize for the best writing in mathematics once, which might just fit into science communication. But no, I was absolutely thrilled. When you look at the list of alumni for this award, it is a list of the people I have the greatest respect and admiration for in terms of science communication. So to be compared to those people is thrilling. My fellow co-finalists were also excellent bunch, all of whom deserved the prizes as much as I did. So I was thrilled to have won this year.
I mean, it is another award that you can add to your amazing list of awards. Does it make
this one means a lot, as you say, because it is the first one. I put a lot of effort into science communication. I mean, the great thing is, I do have a permanent academic position, and so I can actually take the time out to do those things. I do worry a little that my younger colleagues who don't have the academic security that I have can afford to spend the time. So I actually feel a real responsibility that I should be using the security of my academic position to be able to hold what I think actually are incredibly important conversations, because this is a technology that's starting to change our lives. And it's really important that we think carefully as a society about how it's going to impact our lives, and how we make good choices in where we let it in and where we don't let it in.
And definitely, so that is a wonderful segue onto my next little section of questions I was going to ask around the importance of engagement. You're specifically looking at artificial intelligence. Do you want to just elaborate a little further around what the key things that you would love publics to take away from your communication? What are the things you really want people to understand as your driver for engaging?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of it, certainly to begin with, has been driven by fear and by myth. Hollywood is perhaps our worst friend, in the sense that it's filled people with a preconception of what to expect, and much of that still is science fiction, and maybe much of it will always remain science fiction. So certainly, when I started out putting a lot of effort 5 or 6 years ago into communicating what was happening with AI. And back then it was all Terminator, it was all Hollywood. The good thing is that conversation's become much more nuanced, much more sophisticated. And they don't always put up a picture of Terminator when I speak. They sometimes do now, not always. I mean, you could guarantee it so much, like if I was doing an interview on TV, and often when you're doing TV, you don't get vision back, you just have the presenter in your ear. I would say, no doubt you're looking at a picture of Terminator now. We're not talking about that. We're talking about actually much more mundane applications of AI. And Terminator is still a long way off, if ever, coming into our lives. So, the good thing is that the conversation has moved on, but equally, the way that the AI is arriving in our lives is still surprising people, still offers significant challenge, significant fear. I'm sure a lot of the questions we're going to get tonight in Q&A are going to be those ones about people worried about the impact it's going to have on their jobs, the impact it's going to have on our political discourse, on social media, misinformation, as well as the positive things, the way it's going to transform healthcare, education, and all of our business activities.
And so you're clearly advocating that we should be engaging the public in better understanding this future technology, but also to be wary and to put in the appropriate safeguards for its future. I imagine that's sitting a lot in the policy space as well as your public engagement. Do you do much in terms of informing policy from a national or state perspective?
Yeah, I think there's another leg to what one has to do. Is I spend a lot more time than I ever expected, I must admit, speaking to politicians. Once a week, actually, we have some MP or set of MPs wanting to come to the lab, talk to us, be shown around. Indeed, next year at Science Meets Parliament, we're on discussions to run an AI boot camp to help educate politicians of all flavors, give them a grounding in what they need to understand. Because there is a regulatory side to this conversation, that politicians, I think, are actually waking up to the idea that probably this is a space where we need perhaps some more regulation. There's a lot to be done with existing regulation, but equally, we're starting to see AI-specific regulation being adopted, and equally, we're seeing politicians having to make interesting, important decisions about where to invest some of our hard-earned tax dollars. And again, that requires informed conversation. So I spend a lot of time helping politicians, speaking at various strategic fora, writing various white papers that have feeding in, speaking at parliamentary inquiries, and complete surprise to myself, speaking at the United Nations. I've spoken now half a dozen times at the United Nations. I never expected to speak once, let alone half a dozen times, which is a very strange place for a scientist to appear. It wasn't on my bucket list of things to do, was to go and speak at the United Nations. But when I was invited to go and speak about the challenges and opportunities that AI was going to pose to the way that we fought war, I felt a real responsibility to make sure that was an informed discussion and we made some good choices there.
So a lot of that internal responsibility that you feel, I think you did touch on it just a little bit before about the privilege that you have being tenured and you have a full-time ongoing role at the university, that you are able to dedicate as much time to doing this outreach or engaging with decision makers. How do you find balance with continuing your research work? Is it that you're now senior enough that you've got enough postdocs and PhDs to be able to make sure that things keep on ticking along, or is one taking more of a lead now?
I probably spend a third of my time on science outreach, a third of my time on research, and a third of my time on all the other things, administrations, and all the other things that you need to do with being an editor on a journal and reviewing papers, all of that contributes to the way that science continues to function. I do think this is a real challenge. I don't see the structures, the reward structures that we have in science really incentivize people to do this. And I don't think we often, there's a bit of a tall poppy syndrome within science as well. If you put your head up too high, people think, well, why is that person getting all the attention? I would welcome if more of my colleagues spent more of the time helping to answer some of the questions, really. But the reward structures, certainly for people at the beginnings of their careers, even in the middle of the careers, I don't think really reward you enough for the difficult and time-consuming aspect of the job that you need to communicate science. And it's really important, actually, to ensure that we have public support for what we do. And what really worries me is that AI might end up like genetically modified crops, where the public wasn't, as far as one can tell, really, from the sort of conversation we're having now, the public wasn't really brought along properly with that conversation. And now it's Frankenfoods, and people are not realizing that we've been genetically modifying crops ever since we started agriculture. We just now have much more sophisticated, precise ways of doing that. And the benefits that we could have got in terms of drug resistance, climate resistance, disease resistance that we could have got have perhaps not been all secured because the public wasn't sold on the idea. And that was in large part a communication problem. And I'm really worried that the same could happen with something like AI. People will see the negatives, not see enough the positive, and think, well, why are we doing this at all? Why are we giving money to people like Toby to go off and help make our lives worse, not better?
Which I guess goes back to your point around the influence of public media and Hollywood and our stories and our imaginations running free. Yeah,
I do think we should probably hire a scriptwriter in Hollywood and try and churn out a few positive movies. And let's and similarly, we have a real problem. Another example, we have a real gender diversity problem. 20 years ago, I've been working in the field for 40 years. But 20 years ago, people became very aware of this. It was 20% women. 20 years later, we've put a lot of effort, a lot of initiatives. I've contributed a small part to some of those initiatives. It's still 20% women. The dot has almost moved not a dot
Mm.
despite all those efforts. And one of the things it says to me is, well, let's look at the role models. If you turn the TV on, you don't see women in this field. And if you do see the sorts of portrayals of what the men are doing, again, are not sort of the positive sorts of missions that I think would inspire young people today.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that the Office of the Women in STEM Ambassador have released an evaluation portal to try and help address this issue. So that's Lisa Harvey-Smith's team. So I'd highly recommend.
It is, but you look at the data. As soon as kids can start selecting subjects, girls start selecting away from maths and STEM.
Yep, indeed. And I think
the earliest possible point. I mean, it starts at such a young age. I've been a scientist in the school, scientist in the primary school, because looking at the data, I thought this problem starts in primary school. By the time I go and be a scientist in the secondary school, it's already too late. So I've been a scientist in the girls' primary school. So that's where, as I see, the problem starts.
Do you do outreach at the primary level?
Yeah, take robots into primary schools. It's absolutely fun. I mean, it's a pleasure. But equally, I think that's something where we're all inspired by role models. I had a fantastic science master, Mr. Black. I will name him. Sadly, no longer with us, but who is the reason I'm a scientist today. And he piqued my scientific curiosity at a very young age.
I think a lot of us have those stories. For me, I went into chemistry. It was Mr. David Toos, who used to be an ex-bomb tech with the UK Defence Force. And I remember our chemistry.
It sounds like he had some really good demos.
Yeah, so we were doing calculations of how much fuel we'd need to be able to blow out the windows of the chemistry school, and so very, very engaging, right? And those techniques of grabbing a hold of minds and creating relevance, even when it feels very, very abstract, which I think is the key issue in some of those fields where you can't necessarily hold a plant, or you can't see a chemical change. Perhaps now we've got a better thing that you can kind of see with AI, but it's still, I think, quite conceptual. In behind.
It is. I'm going to be an old fogey here, though. Yes, I do worry that things like health and safety is getting in the way of blowing stuff up, which was so fun as a kid. But you're right. I mean, one of the real challenges we have with AI is it is pretty abstract. Most of the AI today, and there's a study done where it's estimated AI touches your life 20 times a day. On an average day, there's 20 bits of AI that come into your life, and most people don't realize any of them. Every time you get directions out of your smartphone, that's little AI that's working out the fastest way, real time, given the current traffic, to get you from A to B. Every time you speak to Siri, it's an AI that's doing the speech recognition. Every time you're getting a book recommendation off Amazon, that's a little AI that knows something about people's preferences that it's giving you. So it's a very much, in that sense, a very much hidden part of your lives, which is why I suspect when ChatGPT burst upon our lives, the last day of November last year, it actually made concrete, made visible. Here's something you could have a conversation with, right? Like a person. People suddenly could actually see AI physically being a useful part of their lives. And in some sense, I suspect why it may have helped catch people's imagination so much.
Because it did feel like it was a drastic change. Because up until the existence of ChatGPT, at least the general public, we were all used to robots calling us or sending us messages, but they would send us things that were completely inane, and the easiest way would be just to respond with something that was confusing, and it would continue with its script. But ChatGPT completely changed that landscape. Are we going to be looking? Yep.
They put it in a very nice interface that made it very accessible. Very easy. You just had to type the URL and you could start having a proper conversation. I mean, what's interesting from an AI perspective is that it's one of those overnight successes that was 50 years in the making. The first chatbots were written in the 1960s, before I was even born. Chatbots previously had been mistaken for humans before that. It wasn't the first large language model. There were GPT-3, GPT-2, Lambda, Galactica. There was a whole host of language models before it. But and there were a few tricks, actually, a few things that are actually quite deceptive that have helped fool people. So, for example, if you've used ChatGPT, and I suspect many people listening to this will have used ChatGPT, when you type a question into it, and then it types out the answer to you, that's pure artifice. Actually, the way it works is that it has the complete answer in milliseconds. You know, the whole paragraph, page of text. It doesn't have to slowly type it out as though it's a human typing an answer, talking to you. But that in some sense fools us. It was a wonderful device to make it more, more of an intimate, personal conversation.
And an interesting language device that is being designed deliberately by humans to make this AI feel more engaging, rather than just Google, right? Because you could just search a question on Google and come up with a page almost instantaneously as well.
You could, except the good thing, that the difference, the fundamental difference, and the fundamental change, as far as Peter's concerned, is that when you search for Google, you don't want links, you want an answer. And suddenly we build a system which does give you an answer. And indeed, that's one of the fundamental challenges. What's going to happen to a company like Google? It's an existential threat to a company like Google, because now we can get those answers directly. So why would we click on the links? And Google, more than 90% of Google's revenue still comes from people clicking on links and the advertising revenue that generates. So if people are getting the answers instantly, how is Google going to make any money? That's an interesting, challenging question for Google.
And of course, we already know that Bing is engaged with OpenAI to integrate they've integrated ChatGPT into their search, haven't they? Is that
yes, part of the new Bing search. Equally, Google is embedding in their large language model Bard in all of their products. And you're going to find, ultimately this is the new operating system, new platform. In every program, every device, you're going to interact mediated through smart intelligence. There's going to be, this is where Hollywood is a good thing. It's going to be like the movie Her. If you remember the movie about 10 years ago, where Joaquin Phoenix falls in love with his new AI operating system. We're going to have that. We're going to have an AI operating system that we talk to, that mediates all of our interactions. That means that we speak at a much higher level to give much more commands to our programs that go off and do stuff for us.
I do want to circle back a little bit to the public good area of what drives your communication, and specifically the advocacy that you do in that policy space. You've mentioned that you've spoken at the UN a couple of times. I was going to bring up that you have been involved in penning a number of open letters calling for international bans on offensive autonomous weapons. You've petitioned our Prime Minister to negotiate towards a ban, at least Wikipedia tells me as such. How important is it for the public to have access to experts and expert communicators who are putting forward these things in that open forum as part of that policy push?
Oh, and I've also been banned from Russia indefinitely as well.
Indeed.
Because of this advocacy.
121 prominent Australians. Congratulations.
Yes. Again, not something I expected to happen, but anyway, interesting. I mean, this aspect of what I do, it sounds a bit grand, but in some sense, for my field, I think this is very much our Oppenheimer moment, which is that we're building a technology which is dual use. That's the fundamental challenge of what we're doing. Just as when the Manhattan Project, they were uncovering the power of the atom, which again, dual use. There's amazing ways to solve our energy problems, but equally also very destructive ways to use that same power. And the moral challenge, the scientific challenge that posed to those scientists very much I feel is mirrored to a certain extent with the debate, the challenge that we see within my field, which is that AI is a great force for positive change, to help us improve our healthcare, understand our biology, transform science, transform our economy, but equally transform war. And I feel a real responsibility then to advocate that we use it in careful, responsible ways, and make sure that conversation is informed by the capabilities and also informed by the limitations of the technology. And we certainly only have to look at what we see happening in places like Ukraine now to see that warfare is being changed, as it always has been, by technology. And in particular, we look at the Ukrainian conflict, we see that AI and autonomy increasingly transforming the way we change war, just as the way that historians of war look back at, for example, the First World War and say the machine gun and the tank completely transformed the way we fought war. Well, we're seeing the technologies that I've been working on, that my colleagues have been working on, again, transforming war. And the real challenge is that it's exactly the same algorithms that have both the positive and the negative uses. I mean, if you want to build an autonomous drone that's going to target people and kill them, you've got to build some computer vision systems that can track and target. Well, it's exactly the same computer vision systems that are going to go in your autonomous cars. They're going to track pedestrians and avoid them. Literally change the sign of the program from avoidance to non-avoidance, and you're going to build yourself an autonomous drone that can target pedestrians. And so that's the fundamental challenge we face in the field. There are many positive uses for the technology work, but equally ones that are much more challenging, much more confrontational.
I did have a couple of questions that were submitted after our last session. One of them was from Jack Foster, who I've noticed I think has just joined us. So I might just jump onto a couple of those for you, Jack, specifically just feeding off the back of what we were just talking about, Toby. Do you feel as though this almost heavy binary between public good and public evil is something that is covered sufficiently in media?
Not really.
Because you were saying that you're concerned
people
about
like black and white. People like black and white. They like certainty. They like to know, is AI going to be good or bad? Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future? And like most things in life, it's much more nuanced. But actually, my favorite way of trying to communicate this to people now is to say, is AI good or bad? I say it's both. And then people say, are you optimistic or pessimistic? I say I'm both. They say, should I be excited or worried? I say you should be both. There are exciting possibilities and worrying possibilities, and we're going to have both of them. I'm pretty certain we're going to have both of them. You can't have one without the other. And so we've got to try and embrace that, try and emphasize the positive and try and minimize the negative.
Are there any particular or specific concepts within AI that you've recognized that the general public fairly well understand or poorly misunderstand? Like we all have
there is a lot,
and now the ChatGPT example, but yeah.
There's a lot of myth and misconception. I mean, perhaps the biggest, most fundamental one is people talk about AI as though it was one thing. The AI is going to be making bad decisions, and not realizing that. But just like our intelligence is a very multifaceted, multi-dimensional thing, AI is actually a collection of a toolbox of different technologies that actually don't fit together, at least today, very well. They're quite disconnected. And we're working trying to help to piece the pieces together to build a more rounded intelligence. But at the moment, it's not actually one thing. It's many different things that play many different roles in many different settings. And so people talk about some sort of science fiction AI. So there's going to be Google's AI, some super intelligence. And actually, I think the better model is to think about human intelligence. There's 8 billion distributed intelligences on the planet today who work together quite well. And that's actually going to be our AI future as well. There's going to be another 8 billion artificial intelligences in all our smartphones, on all our smartwatches, on our cars, everywhere. They're going to be distributed, all trying to work together with each other. And not to think that there's, one super intelligence that Google's running, but actually a lot of distributed intelligence. Intelligence actually works very well in distributed fashion. And indeed, there's many benefits to having intelligence distributed, just as we have many benefits to having human intelligence distributed, in terms of privacy, in terms of ensuring that it's pulling in the right direction for society as a whole.
You prompted a question in my mind, and I'm wondering, because one of the key issues that we're recognizing, at least in communications space at the moment, is that the impact of the misinformation, disinformation, malinformation campaigns, and the concept of considering the globe as a range of multiple intelligences all walking around on two legs, and us possibly having as many, if not more, in the AI world. How are we going to create? Is it even possible, or should we even create some sort of, there be expertise again for us to be able to defer in periods of crisis to the AIs that are more relevant or more accurate in being able to answer questions? And are we going to have exactly the same kind of issues where people are going to trust their little bespoke something that gives them the answers that they prefer?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big question. Yeah, I mean, this is one area that I am somewhat nervous about, the way that we are living in truths and untruths and half-truths. And the whole concept of truth seems to be a very fungible idea at the moment, and how AI is going to supercharge that, where we're going to be able to generate very convincing untruths, video, audio, that is going to be hard not to believe, even though it's completely synthetic. Social media should have been a wake-up call. I'm sure that we've learned all the lessons, and we're about to now take the reach of social media and supercharge it with our ability to personalize content, and do so in a very persuasive way. These are going to be very persuasive technologies. That picture of the Pope in a puffer jacket, not real, invented by AI. Picture of Trump being arrested by the NYPD, again, not real, invented by AI. So what is it going to be like in a world in which everything you see, everything you hear, you have to entertain the idea it's not true? Well, it's synthetic, it's made by AI. And there's no way that no algorithmic way you can test what is real and what is false. The good news is, in about 5 or 10 years' time, we have some technology to fix this. We'll have digital watermarks that will be embedded into a blockchain. Perfect application for the blockchain.
Right,
the distributed immutable ledger of provenance. And you already see it, camera manufacturers are already putting the digital watermark on content when it's generated. And then you'll use the blockchain to trace its provenance, and you're embedded into all your devices. So when you're looking at it, there'll be a little tick mark on your browser that says, Toby, that's safe to look at. Or big question mark over it saying, dubious source, Toby, or being edited by people, so you've got to be very careful. That's going to take 5 or 10 years before that becomes a standard. That becomes an integral part of our digital infrastructure. But in the meantime, what's going to happen in a world where nothing you see online, nothing you hear online can be trusted anymore? There's a bit of me that hopes this is an opportunity for old-fashioned media and experts to step in. People will realize that social media is entertainment only. That's where we go, to be entertained. Nothing can be trusted in social media. And if we want to trust stuff, we have to go to sources of places where we can trust that. And science communication channels, the ABC, the BBC, or wherever it is that we trust to bring us truth.
Definitely. I will just quickly yell out, Jack, if there is anything that you wanted to further ask or whatever, feel free to interrupt and ask at this stage. I've got only a couple more questions for you, Toby, before I let you get onto your plane. Jack, did you want to follow up with any other questions while you happen to be there?
Nothing at the top of my head, but I shall continue pondering as you go on. As you answer your questions, Tom.
Great. Feel free to throw some comments into the chat if there was anything there as well, if anything comes to mind. Something I did want to come to, Toby, and it's an area that the ASC is going to become more increasingly interested in, is around where science communication research is going to be able to best support practice. It's something that international science communication bodies focus quite heavily on the research side or the social science side of science communication endeavor. But something I think is really, really strong about the ASC is that we do kind of straddle both the practice and the research concepts within the communication of science and technology and all of that. I wonder, and apologies if this is a little bit like throwing you a question you haven't thought about yet, but I wonder if there are any kind of research questions from that communication perspective that would be useful to you in your engagement. What kinds of things would make a difference to the way you approach a media interview or a talk to the UN or writing a book? Yeah.
Well, I think there's quite a lot of craft and art to science communication that you're trying to communicate. You're trying to tell stories at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
We are storytellers, and you're trying to learn how to tell stories. And there's, I think there's useful stuff that could be studied from a methodological, scientific perspective, but equally, there's a lot just to be said to doing it. I think I'm a lot better as a science communicator because I put the 10,000 hours in now. I mean, funny enough, my father was reading my latest new book. He said, you're quite a good writer, Toby. And I think, yeah. Well, does that mean that my first 3 books weren't any good? Probably. I put the hours in, and I'm starting to use the rhetorical tricks and devices that good writers, as much as my writing is to help communicate those ideas. Actually, I think science communication is very much like teaching. You're trying to take complex ideas, explain them in simple language, take complex interacting ideas, and turn them into some linear, simple story where everything hangs together. That, to me, is what I have to do when I stand up in the classroom and lecture to a classroom of undergraduates. But to do it on steroids, because I'm not allowed now to use any equations, I'm not allowed to use any technical language, but to break it down even simpler than that. So I actually think probably science communication is something that everyone at university should be taught, because it will make them probably a better teacher as much as it will a good science communicator.
I know that there's a lot of interest at the moment in Jen Martin's science communication training done at Uni Melbourne, where every first year science student will actually go through a semester of science communication training as part of their undergraduate, and there's current discussion around whether or not there should be more of an international push for those kinds of fundamental. Everyone should get a basic training in their undergraduate. But you're saying there's more to it than just training. There's the actual hours and hours and hours of practice.
Yeah. The other thing I've learned, and I've really come to appreciate, is that writing books really helps. If you want to become a good science communicator, I intended to, when I started out, I intended to write one book on AI, but there's a lot of misconception. I'll write a book on AI. Then when journalists ring me up, I say it's in the book. Go read the book. It's chapter 3 in the book. Of course, when John's ringing you up, they're not interested in reading your books. So I said that was a complete waste of time in terms of solving that problem. But I've discovered since, and now I'm on book number 4, which demonstrates it's really helpful because it forces you to come up with a bunch of stories and examples to illustrate the points you're trying to come up with, and to think through the issues clearly. And so that when you go on live radio or a journalist asks you a question, you've already thought carefully through the issue and how to explain it in a way, and how to have lots of nice examples to illustrate what you want to do. And so even if my books did not sell a single copy, I'd still write them because it means I can do the science communication. Because I can, that means I'm much more relaxed. I go into an interview or turn up on TV as I am tonight, relaxed in the knowledge that I do have a wealth of examples and wealth of funny stories to call upon to try and help answer the questions.
And of course, part of that is the use of metaphor and analogy. Jack, one of the questions sent through a little bit earlier was do you have particular favorite metaphors and analogies that you use in your communication or your teaching of AI, so that it becomes relatable to an audience, but also avoids misconception?
Yes. So as an example, I try and persuade people that artificial intelligence is not going to be like human intelligence. And the metaphor is artificial flight and human flight. Well, not human flight, but biological flight, the natural flight that birds and beasts do, with feathers and flapping wings and that. That's one way to solve the problem of heavier than air motion. But there's artificial flight, the stuff that I'm about to do on this aeroplane, with a big fixed wing and a large jet engine. They're both solving the same physics problem, heavier than air, Napier-Stokes equations of aerodynamics that have to be solved. But they're a completely different solution to the problem. Arguably, actually, a much better solution. It'll fly quicker to Melbourne than any bird will get to Melbourne, more efficiently than any bird will get to Melbourne. But it's a completely different type of solution, and that's the metaphor I like people to think about AI. Is that don't think of it like human intelligence. It's going to be as dissimilar as natural flight is from artificial flight. It's going to be, and certainly the indications we already have is that it's a very different type of intelligence than human intelligence.
Yeah, great. I'm just imagining you at the moment in the Qantas lounge, flapping your wings and trying to talk about flying to Melbourne, and that's tickled my fancy.
I get to have a row of seats to myself, I
say. You have just recently launched your most recent book, which is You're Prepared, Making It Artificial Intelligence in a Human World. And you've already discussed a little bit about how writing these books are really valuable to you in terms of your own communication of your field. Was there anything in particular out of Faking It that you'd like to tease anyone who happens to be watching this recording with, that they are so enthralled that they must go out and grab a coffee?
It is focused on that metaphor I was just talking about, which is reminding people that when we think about artificial intelligence, not to focus just on the intelligence. I mean, that's a very important part of us. That's got us to in many respects, to where we've been. But that other word, artificial intelligence, and how artificial different it's going to be to human intelligence. And then what got me writing the book was realizing increasingly fake AI and AI fakes were going to be deceiving us. And how we're going to navigate the world of deep fakes and fake avatars that are going to be fooling us, and how we're going to prepare ourselves for that sort of world.
Definitely, and you do speak. I'm just musing on some of the stuff that you were mentioning before about the impact of ChatGPT and the trick where it started to fool us in terms of it seeming less artificial. And I guess I guess that's actually the key point that you're just making now, is that the artificialness of AI is becoming harder to see. It is a little bit different to looking at an aircraft and looking at a bird. Perhaps it's easier to grab a pair of binoculars and you can go, oh yes, I can definitely see that's an aircraft, not a seagull flying to Melbourne.
Yeah.
Is this yeah?
It's a natural conceit, right? So you and I have a conversation. I don't know that you're intelligent. I don't even know that you're conscious. But
I think there's plenty of
you're
people
saying all the right
arguing
things.
about whether or not I'm intelligent. But
You're saying all the right things. You're responding in the right way. You look. You're a human, so you look like me. So Occam's razor. Simplest explanation for that is to assume that your inner life is much similar to mine. And that's the trap that we fall into with things like ChatGPT, which is that on the surface, it seems to be saying all the right things, but not to, that now the simplest explanation is not that its inner life is like yours. But we naturally fall into that trap. If I meet someone who's an amazing world-class chess player, then it's natural for me to assume that they're really intelligent, because chess players tend to be really intelligent people. But that's not true for AI. If you can come across a chess program that plays much better chess as they do than you do, it's wrong to assume that it's smart in other aspects. In fact, that's probably the only thing it can do. So it's a natural trap for us to fall into. And indeed, actually, what I take away from the success, the fluency of programs like ChatGPT, is that we've overestimated human intelligence. That a huge amount of human communication, writing a business letter, for example, is quite formulaic. As actually, we don't engage. We'd like to think we engage our brains more than we do. We don't. A lot of our communication with each other is literally following a script. And we've taught those scripts to computers now. But then to suppose that they've got all the other intelligent life, inner life behind them is wrong. They're just producing those scripts.
A really evocative thought to leave us on, I think, Toby. Thank you so very much for making the time for this chat. I will just quickly give a shout out to anyone who is engaged or interested in looking at the Eureka Prizes, that the next round of prizes is going to open on the 12th of February, I believe, and close in April normally. So that's for the Eurekas in 2020. Yeah, so next year. So please do have a look at that if you're eligible, and we'll have someone else to chat to next year after the prizes. Toby, a huge thank you again for your time, and a big congratulations again from the ASC and from me personally for your win of the Eureka Prize, and best of luck at Q&A tonight. Dazzle them with your metaphors.
Thank you, but I'm gonna end by saying one more thing about the value of science communication, which is that it's a very contested world we live in. We're going to make the world a better place. We need public to support science more so than they do, and so science communication has a really important role to ensure that the public is sold on the huge benefits that science has brought into our lives, and will continue to do so.
Here. It's preaching to the converted, I'm sure. But we'll use that quote whenever we're like petitioning ministers to try and put a little bit more support behind science communication attached to their research funding or something like that. It was actually really wonderful to see ATSI just recently acknowledge that role of science communication with their I believe it's their first fellow specifically from a science communication perspective, in Susanna from the Australian Science Media Centre being awarded fellowship just recently. So it is.
If I have one more moment, so
please do.
Because European Research Council, for example, you can get extra money on your scientific grants to do science communication work.
Right.
So I think it's absolutely fantastic, right? Because you obviously you want to do science, you've got limited pot of money to do science, but there's extra funds that are solely you're allowed to apply for to actually communicate the science when you've done it. So I think it's a fantastic idea.
And it's something you think that we should be bringing into the Australian, the ARC and HMSC funding models?
If you gave the ARC more money, I'm not advocating that we should be taking away money, the limited amounts of money we've got to spend on scientific research. But if we could persuade the government that we should also have a small pot of money to persuade the scientists to invest time and effort into communicating the science that you've just paid for.
Definitely. We had a very interesting chat a couple of weeks ago with the head of one of the CSCs, who's argues the same, and that suggests that actually that a lot of the funding that they get is because of is facilitated by the quality science communication that the centre does. Anyway, I will leave at that. I know that you have an aircraft to get onto. So thank you for those who have joined us and for those of us who are watching the webinar online afterwards. And thank you once again, Toby. Really, really appreciate your time today.
It's been a pleasure, Tom. Take care.